Former minister and founder of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Tonight's episode, More Than Laissez-Faire, with Bruce Koerber.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Created in the Image of God. I'm your host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is number 114. We have a returning guest tonight, Bruce Koerber, for his second appearance. Bruce Koerber is the author of multiple books, textbooks, and is the originator of the divine economic theory. Last time Bruce was here, we had him provide an overview of his perspective. We dived down into certain topical areas of that. But tonight he'll be doing a more formal approach, presenting the macroeconomic side of his theory, complete with a number of diagrams. Very excited about tonight's show. So hopefully you got your late night coffee or tea or whatever it is that's going to help you stay alert and pay attention, because this is a part of an ongoing series around the more material side of being a spiritual person, living here in a material world, but doing so with spiritual intent. Very excited to have Bruce with us. Welcome to the studio, Bruce.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here with you, Wade, and I'm thrilled to talk about the divine economy theory, and I'm thrilled to talk about macroeconomics.
Awesome. Well, last time you were here, we went into your background a little bit in quite depth as a student of economics, also with a practical application in forestry as part of your original degree. Also, your path as a Baha'i, which is where some of the spiritual part of this comes in. We also talked a little bit about Austrian economics and how you've studied under that rubric, if you will, and also had contact with some leaders in that field. But what would you like to share sort of as general background setting up the topic tonight?
Well, everything kind of economics started within the area of a tradition called classical liberalism. That's where all the initial pieces, discoveries came about, and then they kind of crystallized and came together over the centuries. And so really this is a continuation of that tradition, classical liberalism. It's kind of a reawakening of that tradition.
Awesome. And a couple of questions that have come to my mind around economics and economic theory. There's sometimes the impression of sort of an ivory tower of intellectuals, theorists, and then also sort of rulers who maybe dictate theory, get people to buy into their theory. How do you view economics in terms of educating, let's say, the common man? What is, economics as a theory is some, one or two layers potentially removed from the average person struggling to make his paycheck, fit the week, right? Where is your focus in terms of theory and perhaps influencing decision making at the top or even policy versus educating the average Joe or Jill?
Well, I think what it is people just don't realize that there are laws, economic laws, that operate all the time. And so people, when they learn those laws, and as even if they just learned one and they were sitting in their chair at home drinking a cup of coffee and they contemplated that law, they would be able to see how it applies in their lives. So the really important thing is for people to discover what these laws are and then start to apply them in their life.
So comments already coming in, my apologies. The common person, I certainly did not intend to leave anyone out. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm showing my age and my training and my experience here. My apologies. So Bruce, back to you. The show tonight will feature a number of images, and we've got those prepared to display. But I'll just invite you now to just sort of begin that process and open up the first segment with a discussion of your macroeconomic theory.
Okay, so basically where we're going to start is understanding that the economy is organic. And the reason it's organic is because humans are organic. So the divine economy model, which is what the basically is at the center of the divine economy theory, it shows how organic and logical the economy is. And so, like, if you show the first image.
Oh, sorry. I was distracted there for a moment.
So you can see how organic it is. That looks like a blossom. There are 4 petals and a center, like a blossom. So the 4 petals of the economy are human spirit, transformation, law, and order, and the center is the divine economy. And that's what's known as the anatomy of the divine economy. So you can see how organic it is. We can look at the second diagram. I can't hear you. Okay, so then what happens here? We're talking about the organic nature of the economy. So now we have a skeletal structure of the divine economy. And what happens here is we just basically put these lines with arrows on either end showing the symmetry and the reciprocity that's a natural part of the economy. And there's symmetry and reciprocity in humans and in our interaction in the world. So that, again, this is all organic, and that's showing that. So we can then move to the next diagram. So what we do now is we just added some economic components, economic elements to see how the economy actually works. So it's how it operates, the modus operandi of the divine economy. So what we did is we added to the human spirit, we added purposeful action. To transformation, we added capital structure. To the law fills out nicely with property rights, and it's the market that beefs up the order. So if you notice how, we're talking about appendages. So these are like appendages. So it's the market is beefing up the order appendage, and to the human spirit appendage we add purposeful action. So again, that's that organic part. We're talking about beefing it up, or filling in that skeletal structure of the divine economy, so that we can see how it operates. And so we can go now to the next diagram. Again, the point is we're looking at how organic everything is.
Yeah, and I love the way you're building on this slide by slide. But I want to pause here
Okay.
and talk for a moment about property rights.
Okay.
Because there may be some in the audience who are chafing at that. There was a song by a famous person, and I'm a huge Beatles fan. John Lennon wrote a song years ago that was actually banned on the radio in a number of places and situations. That song was called Imagine. Some of the lyrics of that might come to mind. One of the lyrics of that, or one of the lines of that, is imagine no possessions. Right. And then part of the song was it's easy if you try, right? Imagine no possessions. And so there are those who believe that ownership of property and ownership of capital, right, we're talking Marxism now, obviously, is part of the problem and a fundamental aspect of the problem. But here you are enshrining property rights. So let's just spend a moment on that. What is your position, and perhaps your position as a Baha'i? And I know that in the Baha'i faith there are no clergy, and therefore you and I understand you're presenting your perspective, your opinion. This is in no way any official teaching of the Baha'i faith, and your views are not an official representation of the Baha'i views. But unpack for me and the audience a little bit your stance on property rights and where you would come down on the question that raised by John Lennon about, should we be imagining no possessions? Should we be doing away with property rights?
Well, again, this model it is organic, but it's also spiritual. And so there is spiritual law, so there are laws and spiritual laws that are underlying all of this. So one thing that to keep in mind, since we're talking about something that is spiritual, God has all these names and attributes, and one name and attribute that it can be applied to this idea of property rights is dominion, and another is sovereignty. So these are things when humans are created in the image of God, as the podcast says, and so because we are created in the image, we reflect and possess all those names and attributes. Dominion is one of them. Sovereignty is another. So we have those, and so dominion, in regards to dominion, that there is the ability then to have a domain, and that domain is property. It's whatever, if you have the opportunity and it's lawful, you pick an apple, and as you are eating the apple, the act of eating the apple is showing that you have dominion enough to eat that apple because it belongs to you. So that's a property right. I mean, it's so basic. It goes all the way back to from the very beginning of humanity. There is.
Yeah, I just Googled the definition of dominion. I'm aware of that. There's a Baha'i month, right, called Dominion, reflecting that name and that principle. Control, or the exercise of control, and sovereignty. There's a very close proximity, as you pointed out. A territory or sphere of influence or control, a realm. And going way back to the opening verses of Genesis, we were given dominion. Humankind, sorry for quoting the Bible, which references man, humankind, all persons, male and female, there was never a difference in God's eyes between the man and the woman in that sense. They have dominion and they have sovereignty equally under God, and under God's dominion, we have been given dominion, being created in his image. So thanks for pointing that out. And thanks for clarifying
one more point. There's harmony. Science and religion are in harmony. So we just talked about the spiritual origins or the spiritual significance of dominion, but in economics is a science, and that is one of the laws of economics, property rights. So they're in harmony. Science and religion are in harmony.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do appreciate some of the comments that are coming in. Olga in particular, an interesting dialogue. We'll get to some of those comments later in the show. Keep them coming. We appreciate them. Back to you, Bruce. Oh, you had wanted me to show the next slide.
We can go to the next one, yeah. So what we did here is we just took that model that we just looked at and we submerged it in entrepreneurship, because that's the driving force in the divine economy. So now you have this model that's submerged in latent and active entrepreneurship, and that's what and so all those elements that are in there are surrounded by this entrepreneurship, and whether it's active or latent determines what happens next. But that's what it looks like organically at this stage in the model. So then we can go to the next model. So this is then we add an axis. It's called the justice unity axis, and that's what the divine economy spins around. It rotates around that, and that's what, you know, all these actions and things that are happening in the economy. It's like the planet Earth. It revolves around an axis, and that influences all the things that are happening on the planet. And the same thing with the divine economy. It resembles that, so what another understanding of this justice unity axis is it's the nature and role of knowledge. So that's what's everything spinning and depending upon, this nature and role of knowledge. And so when knowledge, the flow of knowledge is free, then the divine economy is at its optimal. So that's what the end of that component. That's basically what I want to say about the model. The next thing I want to talk about, and we'll go to that in a minute, is how all of this organic nature of the model is now put into the book. The book is called More Than Laissez-Faire, and that book it presents macroeconomics within a narrative. And that narrative is organic also. And so at any moment, we can go into that. I didn't know if we were going to pause here or not, but I can then talk about that organic narrative of that book.
Well, I love spending a little time on words and their meaning. I think that helps people unpack it, lets it breathe, lets people come along, engaging their own minds in the activity of learning, right?
Okay.
So laissez-faire, I speak French. I would loosely translate it, again referencing the Beatles tonight, with a Beatles song title called "Let It Be." Is that an accurate translation of laissez-faire? Let it be.
Yes, it is. Yes.
I'd actually never made that connection. Let it be translated into French would be laissez-faire, right? And then you have business, des affaires, right? Affairs are affairs, laissez-faire. So unpack laissez-faire and then share why your model is more than.
Okay. Well, it's basically an argument. Laissez-faire is an argument that can be presented as in opposition to alternatives. So these are alternative means. See, let me mention this. Economics is the study of the means to attain the ends chosen. So if the chosen end is peace and prosperity, there are many ways of getting there, you think, you know. So people will propose this, and like Marxism is supposedly a means to attain something like that. So laissez-faire is one of those means, and it's an argument against the other views about how to get to that end, peace and prosperity, for instance. But what there's a weakness in that argument, because it doesn't go to the next level, which the divine economy theory does, which says that the reason that you let things alone is because the economy is a divine institution given to humanity as part of its social nature, and any interference, any activity that imposed by limited human minds corrupts that. That the providence of God is built into the economy, and so that's the difference between laissez-faire and the divine economy theory. Laissez-faire is an argument that says this is the best means. Divine economy theory says it's the best means because God made it.
So we've got a comment here that I'd like to spend a moment on from peace on earth. Property without owner means devastation, right? And the example of the USSR, the Russian Revolution, ending up in Stalin, state control, centralized economy. For you and for the audience, I spent about 15 years, close to 15 years in Europe, Sweden, Germany, but also I traveled extensively in the Eastern Bloc countries before the Iron Curtain came down. I saw what was going on. East Germany was supposedly one of the strongest economies in the world and one of the engines keeping the Soviet Union afloat. Once the wall came down and the reunification of Germany happened, it became very clear that it was very much a facade, a pumped up facade, that the system wasn't working at all, right? But then the second half of this, capitalism, is another extreme, and all the money goes to one pocket. I'm going to just push back a little bit on that. Property without owner, communism, socialism per Marx, does have the idea that there is no ownership, but capitalism does not necessarily mean all the money is going in one pocket. Here's a definition of capitalism: an economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately or corporately owned, and development occurs through the accumulation and reinvestment of profits gained in a free market. And again, another modified definition. This is they always have multiple definitions. I'll go ahead and post this other one because I want to spend a minute on this, because I'm not a proponent of, let's call it, naked capitalism, but I'm also not a fan of equating communism the lack of property ownership in that sense of communism, not necessarily the political structure, but and capitalism as being equally bad, right? Certainly to an extreme, capitalism delivers negative results and unintended consequences, but one of them is fundamentally and tragically flawed and bad, while the other is a mix of good and bad, if that makes sense. Here's that other definition: a socioeconomic system based on private property rights, which we talked about, including the private ownership of resources or capital, with economic decisions made largely through the operation of a market unregulated by the state. Now, I would submit, and Bruce, I'd like your opinion on this, without some regulation, you don't even have a market, right? The idea of a free market that's completely unregulated, it depends on what you mean by regulation, but there have to be agreed upon rules in a market, or else you don't have transactions taking place, right? The free flow of information has to be given, and people are going to want the ability to verify, right, that information. So a complete lack of regulation, I don't believe that's intended in capitalism. But I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, I think mostly capitalism is misunderstood, and it's really a variant of statism that people attribute capitalism to. But here, to me, and this is what I understand: if you start from the very base and go up rather than from the top down, the very base is what capital is. And let me give you a definition of capital so you can see how intimately connected it is to every human being, and so there's nothing wrong with it, and then things that come out of it are beautiful if they're not interfered with. So capital is really goods for the future. That's what it is. Capital is goods for the future, and not a single human being from the beginning of time ever, and every person who's in existence right now, is not looking for goods in the future.
So there's an aspect of
everyone is a capitalist.
So there's an aspect of delayed gratification. There's even in nature, we often think of the squirrels putting away nuts for the future, right?
But it's even more immediate than that, because right now, okay, I'm getting a drink because I'm thirsty. That instant right there, this is goods for the future until right now. So
Okay, so even consumption
is definitely,
is the use of capital.
A person lives in the present, but 1 second later is the future.
Okay, so
they're making a decision about the future all the time. That is goods for the future. That's what's motivating humans, so that you can't take it away from of the reality of a human being. Capital is part of a human being.
So just to think about this idea of capital for a moment, because this is a new perspective that I'm gaining in this moment. The example that you used of me drinking coffee, I am taking in something for the use within my system, in the same way that a company might get natural resources to produce goods that are then sold in the market. So at the micro level, and not to confuse this with micro and macroeconomics, that's something I'll leave to you to explain. I'm not talking about that per se, but at the micro level, the fractal pattern, right, of this, we are all, we are an economy. Our body is an economic system. Right. And those principles are in operation as we go through life, indeed, as we live. So there's this quote in the Baha'i writings that says reward and punishment are the twin pillars of civilization. And it goes further than that and said, this is life itself, right? So that might be one way to understand it is life itself, because if I were not applying the principles of reward and punishment in my choices and decisions on a day-to-day basis, I would not be able to survive, because I would not be practicing in a way that's sustainable for me as a single entity, the principles of reward and punishment. I would cease to exist by failing to apply the principles of reward and punishment in, even deciding to breathe. Not that we can decide to breathe, but you get my point.
Yeah. And the other element to that, okay, so I'm drinking this tea or whatever it is here. Where'd this cup come from? Where'd the tea come from? Those were goods that were made for the future. I didn't just make it myself right now. So capitalism is basically the goods for the future, but everything we're doing is based on goods that we already have, that were made, that are now in the present, that were from the past, because someone, so it's like you can't separate these things. You can't say, this is. So back to the question about, capitalism. I think what people are defining as capitalism is a version of statism. It's where the state is controlling the resources so that it's directing it towards so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But that's really not capitalism. That's statism that uses capital to manipulate things.
Well, and that's where regulation in a regulated system where the state, is the regulator, you get these politicians and you get lobbyists, and laws begin to be passed that favor certain people. So it's not capitalism that is the problem at all.
That's true.
Right? In fact, if capitalism is the solution to that, not the problem.
Capitalism gives us goods for the future, but it's misunderstood and it's slandered. But that's kind of an intentional thing that's happened historically, so that people kind of shift towards socialism, because they think, well, this is an alternative, but it's not. They're both variations on oppression. Interesting.
Did we want to get back to your diagrams, or did you have more to say on this topic?
I want to talk to you about the book itself.
Okay, so I think we're on diagram number 6. Or do you want? Did you?
So the alternative macroeconomics given to you in More Than Laissez-Faire is embedded in a narrative, and that narrative is also organic. The narrative resembles the description of a mighty apple tree. So we can go to this next graph because what does growth look like? So we're going to see the organic nature of growth. So imagine this. Okay, how many people, I think everyone here knows, if you wanted to see the growth of a tree and you cut that tree down or whatever and see how much it was growing, you could look at the tree rings. Okay, and that would show you the growth of the tree. Well, in economics, there's what's called production possibilities frontier. And it's this little diagram of a little curve there. And so that's like the growth. That's what a tree ring looks like just by itself. Okay. But if you were going to see what it looked like when it grew, then you'd look at the one on the right where you see it's going, you're seeing these growth rings going out. And so what causes growth? It's okay. So for instance, in this example, it says, if the laws that protect are greater than the laws that encroach, then you have growth. So over time, you have growth if that's the environment that tree is growing in, where laws protect are greater than laws that encroach, then you have growth. So you have these growth rings like you would on a tree. And then if you show the next diagram.
Well, let's spend a moment on this because I'm thinking of different applications of protecting and encroaching, right? There's the rub in today's world because laws are passed all the time that protect one thing while encroaching on another.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
I could cite, the examples are innumerable.
Right.
So, for example, I can give an example right now. We have a summer camp program, Hillcrest Orchard Camp, under the Royal Falcon Foundation. we had some situation occur. We don't want to go into details, but we're looking now at not being able to use this very big, beautiful pool we have that we want to share with people coming to the camp, because there are regulations around what is required if you have a pool at a program like that. And in this particular case, just to give an example, I think this is worth spending a moment on. It's a practical example. It's very real. This is not theoretical, right?
Right.
So we have a pool cover, which is an electric pool cover that opens and closes. And this pool cover keeps the leaves from getting in the pool because we live in a property that is surrounded by trees. And so the pool is constantly being polluted with these leaves, and also it takes energy to heat the pool, and the pool is a solar cover. So by having a pool cover on the pool, it really works. It works well. It works beautifully. But there's a regulation that says you can't have a pool cover on because somebody could get trapped under that pool cover and thereby die. And then there's also a need somehow to drain the pool quickly because there are other regulations. So the pool that we have doesn't have an industrial size drain. And so the pool would now have to be basically destroyed and rebuilt to put a drain in the pool. So these are regulations that are designed to protect, but that actually encroach.
Right.
So now we're looking at not having the capital to make those improvements to bring it up to the standard. Right. Now, what's right, what's wrong? You could make arguments for either case. So this is a practical example. No evil, no good necessarily in this example of that growth point.
I think you can see what happens when you can use this diagram to see whether those are laws that encroach or laws that protect. Because if they were laws that protect, there would be growth going on. Instead of you would have people coming and having fun.
Well,
that would be the growth. And if you can't do that because now people aren't able to have fun in the pool, then it's definitely encroachment.
Well, and it's not just fun, right? This is an educational
Yeah,
camp, an
yeah.
educational experience. We also do serve the underprivileged, to a degree. We recently had a group of people come from the other side of town. They would not have had the opportunity to come to our property in their normal life. It was a free offering to them to come and experience this,
Mhm.
and to not give those particular children these kinds of opportunities is one of the things that many of the people that want all these regulations want to accomplish. But what the regulations they're choosing are actually counterproductive to
Right,
that purpose, because in the end they don't get to go there at all, because we can't have the pool open, because we are limited in our ability to accumulate capital through taxation. And now the state is applying those funds that they're taking away from some people in other ways that are in very often, as we see in communism, much less productive than
right,
giving more freedom
right,
to those who could accumulate capital on their own and deploy it locally with intent and local knowledge to the local circumstances that meet actual needs, not theoretical needs that are decided in some centralized organization.
yeah. So you see the diagram doesn't say what qualities they're talking about with regards to defining what growth means. So whatever that is that you're talking about as growth is experiences, education, all those things. Those represent the growth. There's no the axes aren't labeled in that regard. So you can see that the positive things are what's the growth. Like in the book itself, it has then the alternative to this, where you have what happens if the laws that encroach are greater than the laws that protect. Then the arrow goes the other way. You go from, and so it's causing everything to recede and get smaller, and the opposite of growth. So this diagram can be used to kind of help a person recognize. I mean, it doesn't mean it solves the problem, but you can answer your question whether that's a law that encroaches or that's a law that protects.
Awesome. Well, we've been getting into this so intensely that we've neglected to go to a commercial break, which is an overview of your book. And we've had some comments about wanting to understand what divine economy is and where's this going. So we're going to take a quick commercial break and show that video, which describes your book. When we come back, we'll proceed from where we left off. So don't go anywhere. This is fascinating. I can't wait to be right back with Bruce after this.
Politics out of economics. Our economic problems have become a tool for political manipulation. But is there a way to break free from the old paradigms? Introducing More Than Laissez-Faire, a revolutionary textbook that challenges today's financial principles. Economics is more than just data. It's a science of human action, a philosophy that respects the human spirit. Bruce's groundbreaking model uses the methodology of subjectivism, starting simply and growing into a complex, dynamic framework that integrates all economic theory, providing real solutions to today's economic challenges. Discover the alternative that the world has been waiting for. More Than Laissez-Faire, a macroeconomic textbook alternative by Bruce Koerber, available now at Amazon.
Awesome. So the question had come in, what is the divine economy? And we're unpacking it slowly. Is that right? Or is there something you want to say in answer to that question?
The divine economy is reality. It's the part of the human reality. That's what it is. And our job and my job, and then all of our jobs is to understand what that means and what it is. And because I'm technically trained as an Austrian economist, and I understand the harmony of science and religion, and I was given this model through a dream that I then developed, we can learn this together. How the divine economy is a part of human nature, human reality.
Well, and I'm reminded of a guest that we'll have back here soon, Joseph Atman, and his description of the Garden of Eden, and the forbidden fruit being the awareness, the ability to form our own views, our own concepts, in order to deal with reality, in order to engage reality at our level of awareness, at our level of consciousness. We have to form mental models, constructs, in order to deal with reality. This model and these series of images, they are constructs that help us engage with reality. But Joseph Atman explains that every time we create one of those concepts, we are now engaging with the concept, not with reality itself. And as I've pointed out, this is the commandment, thou shalt have no false gods, thou shalt make no graven images to bow down with them. We form our own construct around what reality is. In the Baha'i writings, you might think of the phrase vain imaginations and idle fancies. These are flawed constructs. So when we read, for example, holy writings, whether they're the Bible, the Baha'i writings, we form an interpretation in our mind of what that means. And then we begin to address the world through our own view, our own understanding of that. And I see this all the time. We all see it all the time in our friends whom we love and who may profess to believe the same things, but then we see them actually believing something a little bit different from what we believe, applying it a little bit differently from the way we believe it. They might be right, we might be right, they might be both okay, they might be both acceptable, but one of us might be very wrong and the other one might be very much right? But we all are trapped in our own construct of reality, and we're not actually engaging with reality. So that center blob, that center bloom in the blossom, the divine economy, you're saying it's simply reality. It is what is. Is that correct?
It's closer than our life vein. I mean, it is. We are. I mean, and that's why it's important that we understand. We try to connect with it.
Great. So, a follow-on question from Peace on Earth: what is the essential element of the divine economy that makes this model different from the current one, and which the current model lacks? And I guess there are bazillion current models, right? There's not one current model, but
right.
So,
well, I think it's the understanding of the essential harmony of science and religion. Basically, that's what classical liberalism. That's its origins, and this is the rekindling of that classical liberalism.
So, would you say then that the harmony of science and religion in this context of this discussion might be defined as the ability to more fully engage with reality versus a flawed, partial engagement with reality? Because if you're only engaging through religion, which is the constructs, because none of us receive the revelation perfectly, we all form a version of it in our minds. And then in the religious sphere, that becomes a hermetically sealed belief system. In the classical Christian tradition, you believe in a Satan and you're told to resist the devil, right? You're told to hold fast that which you have, lest somebody take your crown. I'm quoting scripture now, right? And therefore, we tend to begin banning books because they're leading us astray. We withdraw into our own echo chamber where our reality makes sense to us and our fellow believers, regardless of what science is telling us. But on the scientific side, you descend into materialism. You end up with Marx and communism, a godless society that somehow goes so far off despite trying to apply science to solve its problems. And you create Frankenstein monsters that way too.
Well, I think the elements that are really important here is, first of all, humans are subjective. So anybody who's trying to create something that manipulates people is an error, because humans are subjective. There's no way you could correctly anticipate what they want, what they need, and the market takes care of that. So anything else is trying to do what the market does, and they're doing it in a very vain and narrow way. And the other thing is, humans are spiritual. So both because they're subjective and spiritual, there is no way of manipulating people economically. There's no role for the government in the economy. The economy takes care of itself because it's an expression, it's a gift, it's a providence of God. And when we allow it to work, it will work.
So this is raising a number of interesting concepts, but to further address Peace on Earth's comment, he meant capitalism, or this person, sorry to all the women, I referred to they meant capitalism, right? So in other words, I guess what this person is asking is, what is the difference between the divine economy model and capitalism?
Well, it depends on what definition of capitalism a person has. If they
right. So let's go with the definition here. Let's use this definition of capitalism in terms of answering this question. And I think this may be a little different than what Peace on Earth understands under capitalism, but that's part of the education, right? So this is a formal general definition of capitalism: a socioeconomic system based on private property rights, including the private ownership of resources or capital, with economic decisions made largely through the operation of a market, unregulated by the state. So how is this different from your divine economy model?
There's one difference, and that is that the social and economic system, which appreciates and understands that humans are subjective and spiritual and based on private property rights, including private ownership and resource. So you just add that to the beginning of it, and that's the divine economy theory.
So ideally, the American project, and by that I mean the what became the United States of America, right? The project launched by our founding fathers actually did anticipate the spiritual nature of man, because we were created with inalienable rights. However, the introduction of the separation of church and state led to a more material version of this socioeconomic system than might otherwise have been the case. I'm not advocating for the reunion of church and state. That's a whole nother Oprah. But I'm just saying the way that capitalism played out in this nation, that's where, you began to see more of a divide from the spiritual, right, veering off into the material, perhaps. I don't know.
Interesting.
Okay, so probably time to get back into your model. Do you want to say anything further?
Okay, so then just go to the next one.
Okay.
This just shows you how the growth is like the growth in the tree. See, the tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it affects everything, not just that one quadrant, but everything is affected as it grows. So then you can go to the next one.
Well, and of course, what we see in the human experiment is this being applied, but being applied imperfectly, right? So you have chaos, creation, destruction, right? You have the emergence of a growing model that ultimately collapses based on some fundamental structural flaw, such as we were talking about, where you're veering off into an extreme materialism in this country, divorced from spiritual understanding, doomed ultimately to collapse, even though I would submit, and this is my opinion, but I stand by it and I could support it and show proof, American style capitalism has raised more people out of poverty than any other system extant in this period of history, right? So, but 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 as we know, teetering, doomed to failure, creating extremes of wealth and poverty at this time, as it has gone through your image 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, and grown dramatically. Is that fair?
Well, the only thing that's unfair about it, this diagram here has nothing to do with any political system. So the
Correct,
American,
but I'm
this
just
is
saying.
this is actually what the divine economy does in an ever advancing civilization, which means it's not connected to the state.
But it's within a civilization, right? By definition of the line under your diagram, in the frontiers of an ever advancing civilization. So does civilization advance without some kind of an organization, a political organization?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Anything else to say about this?
It's just the difference between people knowing what the divine economy is and not. So it's an educational thing that people will get to the point where they recognize their qualities and the qualities that of the world around them, and operate within that domain instead of being uneducated about it. And that's what the divine economy theory does. It tries to help people understand what the economy is. So if we go to the next diagram, it'll be interesting.
Okay.
Because again, this is the organic nature. We looked at the blossom. We looked at the growth rings. Now we're looking at the canopy. We're looking down on the tree. Okay, and so we have.
Allow me to go back for a moment here, because I was born in Canada. I've lived in 7 different countries. Admittedly, they are largely Western economy states that I lived in. But I lived in a number of countries that people would consider socialist. And as I mentioned, I traveled in the East Bloc countries, which were truly socialist and communist. I was in Russia at about the time of its collapse, Gorbachev's abduction. I've shared that story a couple of times on the show. So again, in the same way that I used the swimming pool example, I want to stick with the example of the United States of America for a moment, right? So again, we had a robust, unbelievably rapidly growing economy within the state, in the sense of the sphere frontiers of an ever advancing civilization. Whether there was or wasn't how much political involvement, nonetheless, the American economy was unbelievable, in the sense that it also generated the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle of West Germany after the collapse of World War II, under the protective umbrella of the United States. I might mention also, for those who feel very negative towards America, in the wake of World War II, despite what was done to Japan to end that war, under the protective umbrella of America, the Japanese formed the world's first pacifist constitution under that protective umbrella, and again became one of the largest economic locomotives in the world. So you had America and Japan under the protective umbrella of America, with its own growing economy, developing just an incredibly advancing economy. So let's talk for a moment about the difference between state involvement and state non-involvement. What does that actually look like in practical terms? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
I'm actually trying to give you an opportunity to give an example here.
Okay, so what we're looking at now is the economy in its pure sense. It has nothing to do with the state.
Correct.
But okay, so the third book in my series is called Ethical Economics for Today and Tomorrow. And in that book, the model is developed in such a way that you can actually see the decline of civilizations because of the intervention of the state.
Awesome. So
not at this point here.
We will get to that.
Yeah.
Not even tonight, maybe not even next time, but as we progress in this series. So Franson, put a pin in it and let the man talk. But I want to make sure that people know we're gonna challenge you to unpack it for us in a way that's meaningful to us and doesn't just remain in the world, in the realm of abstract theory.
Yeah, and it's visual, so when I show it to you, you'll see how that happens. But
I love it, and based on the diagrams we've seen so far, I'm looking very much forward to that.
Okay, but this is like looking down at the canopy of the tree, and it still has these elements: law, order, transformation, and human spirit. And each quadrant then has qualities. Like that one quadrant between human spirit and order is called human spirit order quadrant. And so there's laws and principles and concepts, economic laws, concepts, and principles, which are the leaves of this tree. You're looking down on the canopy, and those are the leaves, and they kind of have characteristics that fit them into one of these quadrants. And you can look at that at the next diagram. So these are economic laws and concepts and principles. And they are, every human being would benefit from knowing what the laws are. I mean, if you know what the law of gravity is, and so that means you don't, do something that would go against that law. So every human being should know what the economic laws are. And that's what's nice about this model. It puts them in, relative to one another. So you can see them in how they interact, and you also get to learn what they are. So that's the beauty of this canopy of within the divine, within More Than Laissez-Faire, which is the narrative of this tree. Okay, so now we've looked at the canopy. Now let's look at the fruits, which is the next diagram.
Well, and
okay,
but before we do that, we had committed to some of the audience members that we would go ahead and make sure we did our commercial breaks.
Sure.
So I'm gonna have to put a break in here, but for everyone that's listening, we're gonna go a little bit overtime tonight to make sure that Bruce gets through the remaining diagram. But we're gonna take a quick commercial break and be right back. This is a book related to one of our guests that we've had on the show previously, might be in the audience tonight. Their approach to teaching children about basic economic theory. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
I'm lean, I'm green, and I'm a money machine. Welcome to my new book, Money is Easy, where I branch out with glee, revealing the message, money is as easy as counting 1, 2, 3. This is my first book in the Money Mike and the Gang 4-book series, where I get together with my good friends and reveal hidden secrets in my tree leaves that pay dividends. I'll teach you 3 simple steps on how to get rich, so you can tell a friend and also help their lives to be enriched. So check out my new book and you will see that money really is easy as counting 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back. So for those of you who are looking for something that's a little bit more age appropriate for young kids, and you want to teach them economic principles, check out the series that we shared there. So Bruce, back to your image number 9. Was there anything else you wanted to say about this before I went to the break?
Nope, I just think that's interesting. This was about a tree and that was about a tree. And on this tree, it's learning the economic laws. So that's what happens in the More Than Laissez-Faire. You learn the economic laws, and it's the health of these leaves that make the tree grow. Okay, so now let's go and look at what the fruits are. So basically, the fruits of this tree are policies that create an environment for growth. And so this is an example of a policy, a fruit that comes from understanding the economic laws, and that is abolishing war and inflation increases the divine economy. So that axis there, that unity justice axis, that just shows movement of the economy is advancing. So as war and inflation are abolished, then you go towards prosperity. So these policies, there's 11 policies in the book, and they come from all the theory and the understanding that comes from the content that leads up to this last chapter, which is showing the fruits of which are the policies of the divine economy theory. And so then go ahead.
Can you give us an example of a policy, or is that coming in the next slide?
That's the policy right there, abolishing war and inflation.
Okay, so I'm a little bit at a loss for words. As again, to make that practical, right? Because I've really enjoyed Peace on Earth's comments here, but peace on Earth is perhaps viewed more as a sentiment than a policy.
Well, for instance, to abolish war in a practical way of doing it is make anyone who making those decisions that they are accountable for it. Right now, they're hidden. You don't know who's making the decisions, and if it's a bad outcome, they don't pay the consequences. So one of the ways of abolishing war is making that the accountability for those kind of decisions. And that's what's happening with all these things. There's no accountability. They're doing these things with no accountability, and it's causing great suffering. But they don't receive any consequences. So it's basically.
So let's focus for a moment then on inflation, because I'm thinking of various responses, and given the current situation, especially in the last year, with certain wars that are going on,
right.
I'm having a hard time responding in any way that won't end up being a political discussion, right? So let's talk about inflation instead for a moment.
Okay. They're related.
Yeah, they are, but again, we have policies intended to slow down inflation, and that's the best we can hope for, right? In our current abilities, our current capacities, we have not found a way to even come close to abolishing inflation.
Well, so
unless you
understanding
perhaps have some examples I'm not aware of, which is very likely.
Yeah, there's several policies that lead up to this ability to prevent inflation, and one is a gold standard. So one of the policies is adopting a gold standard, and the reasons are given why, but one of the reasons is it abolishes war, and it stops inflation.
Yep. Okay. Great. That's fair. That's great. That's a great example, which we might unpack in future episodes. Did you have one? I don't think I have any more images after this.
No, that's the last image. But I want to say that the book then concludes. So we looked at the blossom, we looked at the growth rings, we looked at the canopy, we looked at the fruits, and the last thing is the seed. And the seed is how things are. How does this get propagated? Seeds is a great way of propagating. So basically, this more than laissez-faire, it can go anywhere in the world at any point, and it can be planted in the fertile soil of a mind that is looking independently, investigating the truth, and it'll grow at a pace which the steward gets accustomed to, and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it bears fruit, and that cycle just continues until eventually everyone understands what the divine economy is.
So going back to this image, that T0 is the seed, right? The understanding, the awareness. It's planted in my mind. I'm now thinking of this when I drink my coffee. This is not this is actually the grand scam of things. I had a friend who was a producer of this video. It was based on a Nigerian plot to steal a grandmother's money, the grand scam of things. And I was an executive producer of that little mini economy series years ago. And I have that coffee cup still on my desk. So sorry, as I then drink this in and I'm drinking my coffee and I'm realizing, wow, I am an economy. And I'm putting this into practice in my own life. The ideas that I'm coming up with is I'm moving away from John Lennon's Imagine series. I'm accepting the idea that I have dominion. Right? I'm accepting the idea that I have dominion and I have sovereignty, and therefore I have the right to own property. And in fact, in a sense, I have a responsibility to own property. Right? I have you know, when Adam was put on earth. And I'll share this, you know, I've talked about this before, but this keeps coming clearer and clearer to me through this show and many other experiences. When the first human was put on earth, who according to the Bible was a man in the story, Adam, was put in the garden, and Eve wasn't there yet, right? Because this was before the animals were brought to Adam, and he named the animals, and he realized, wait, the lion has a lioness, you know, the buck has a doe, and I got nothing, right? This is the story. Before that happened, and God issued the famous commandment, be fruitful and multiply, which is like the only commandment of God we've ever followed, becoming the most invasive species the world has ever known, right? Before we received the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, Adam was put in the garden, and he had a purpose. And the purpose was to dress and keep the garden, right? In a sense, as a caretaker, but you're pointing out, no, we had dominion. So he had to take ownership of the garden, right? He had to take ownership of the garden. Let me repeat that a third time, especially given that, you know, a few years ago we had the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I used to say you can't occupy something you don't own. I can occupy my house, right? But I can lease it or I can buy it, but I'm not allowed to occupy it if I don't own it. So the oxymoron going there, and a fundamental flaw in thinking, we're going to occupy Wall Street. We're going to take it over. We're going to steal it, right? We're going to take possession of that which we don't own. No, Adam was supposed to take ownership of the garden, not as an occupant in a sense, but as an owner, as a cultivator, as a nurturer, taking ownership, taking possession of it, and improving it, growing it. Taking ownership of myself, accountability for myself, taking myself into account every night, physically and spiritually, and over time accumulating wealth so that I can share it with others. So we have this property, we have this swimming pool, we're trying to share it with others, and we're coming up against regulation that doesn't really want us to share it freely with others. We're being regulated, we're being constrained. And of course, there's some good intent behind it, but it's become a Frankenstein monster, right? Where it's oppressive, it's coercive,
Right.
It's taking from us, it's not empowering us.
Right.
Am I kind of getting a sense of one way in which we veer away from the divine economy model?
Yeah. We're not living in any sense in the divine economy right now, but we can get there if we learn.
So we have to take responsibility, accountability, learn, and put these principles into practice. Jesus said, I think it was Jesus. In any case, it's throughout the Bible. He that is faithful in little, I think Jesus definitely said this. He that is faithful in little will be faithful in much. And this is the parable of the talents, right? People familiar with the parable of the talents? The master gave talents to some of his servants, and one servant traded and grew the talent base threefold, one tenfold, but one servant buried his talent in a napkin, and when the king returned, he gave it back. He says, why have you done this? He says, well, I've kept it. I've preserved it for you. Here is that which you gave me. I'm giving it back. And he said, shame on you. Take the talent from him and give to the one who has 10. And everybody said, well, that's not fair. How can you do that? That guy already has 10. And Jesus said, to him who has will be given more, right? So working within the divine economy, producing benefits for other people is expected. Again, in this model of an ever advancing civilization. And going back to, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of summarizing your book here as I'm digesting
it. I appreciate it.
Going back to, wait, where was it here? Oh, I know this image here, right?
Right.
We want that arrow to be growing outwards, to be expanding. We don't want it to be collapsing in on itself. But some of the ideas that people have around regulation, when the false seed is planted and people begin to try to tell other people how they should behave in this regard, sometimes growth is constrained and even destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be careful what we wish for, because, John Lennon saying, imagine no possessions. Well, we now know what that looks like. And even at his time, he should have known better. He should have known what that looks like, because we had the examples of nations who had abolished not war and not inflation, but had abolished possessions, and the state owned everything.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Bruce, that you want to add? I'm sorry for sort of wrapping. I'm just digesting here.
I got to the point of the seed, which is the more than laissez-faire, which needs to be planted around the world.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to apologize to one of our authors. We had a video. Well, no, I'm just going to do this, and hopefully people will stick with it. I'm going to play a quick video for one of our authors that we had planned for tonight, and we were talking so much we didn't get to it. But I think this also illustrates the idea of diving back into history and understanding God's great plan as part of this education, part of this seed. I'm going to play this real quick, and we'll be right back to wrap this up.
Ancient tapestry of Israel's prophetic legacy with the Coming of the Glory book series. Volume 1 unveils the foundational pillars of Israel's history, from the patriarch Abraham to the prophetic mantle carried by Elijah. Volume 2 immerses you in a world of turmoil and revelation, where prophets like Jonah, Amos, Isaiah, and Jeremiah stand as beacons of courage. Volume 3 delves deep into the tapestry of biblical exploration, weaving threads of insight into the enduring struggle between belief systems. Experience the triumphs and trials of the Israelite, from exile to restoration, guided by prophets and divine intervention. Embark on a quest of discovery and revelation with the Coming of the Glory series, a harmonious blend of history and prophecy. Secure your copy today.
So lots of opportunities for education. This one diving deep into prophetic history, all the way back to the books of Genesis, some of which we've covered tonight. A fascinating series, and I'm very proud to be sharing that here on the show. So I have nothing left to do tonight personally, except to announce next week's show. Bruce, what do you have to share to wrap this up for our audience?
Well, when we meet again in a month, we're going to talk about microeconomics, and it is as earth-shattering and shaking as this macro version was.
Well, I'm so honored to be here helping you unpack this and learning as I go. I look forward to that. And as Bruce mentioned, a reminder, the first Tuesday of every month, we'll be having Bruce for the next 2, 3, 4, I forget the number left. And we'll probably have him back again after that, because this is so wonderful and so educational and foundational, really, to understanding our path in the world. Even though we're definitely interested in the spiritual and our connection to God, we've seen today how thinking in terms of economics and an economy is essential to our daily life. So Bruce, thank you so much. Next week, we have a new guest. His name is Michael Berry, and he has twin master's degrees in early church history and biblical studies from Providence College. Early on in his experience, he questioned the idea of a place of eternal punishing, right? So we talked today about reward and punishment, the twin pillars of civilization. And, at a spiritual level, we kind of know how that has traditionally been positioned. Well, Michael's position is a little different. He questioned the idea of a place of eternal punishing, right? Where people would be punished on an ongoing basis forever. God does not have a concentration camp somewhere, he says. Less clear, though, is exactly what is hell. God's judgment, he says, and God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Rather than me rambling about this, let me play a quick video as to what you can expect on next week's show with Michael Berry, and then we'll be right back. So next week we'll have Michael Berry talking about hell is a bad word. We hope you'll be here for that, 8 p.m. Central Time as always, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. And Bruce, we so much look forward to having you back a month from now to talk about microeconomics.
Okay, great.
And for everyone else, that's it for tonight. We apologize for not getting to more of the comments, but we greatly appreciate everybody who weighed in. Actually, you know what? I do want to go back to this one comment. I'm sorry. For those of you who are still here, why not, right? So Olga, early on in the show, asked this, and maybe we can conclude with these thoughts, Bruce. Can we apply laissez-faire to the life of society in general? Politics, governments trying to control different spheres of life for people to take care of themselves without interference? Because, you know, the show title tonight included the idea of removing politics, right? Separate politics from economics. So maybe this is a good concluding comment to end with.
Well, the world is basically believes in the ideology of statism, and what statism is, it's the lack of belief in voluntary social cooperation. That's what it is. And so people don't think that we can voluntarily social cooperate and create and live in an environment of peace and prosperity. That we need something else to do that for us. And it doesn't happen. I mean, God did it for us. We just have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, we were created sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
We were given sovereignty on this earth, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually in the Bible, and it's in the Baha'i writings, right? And here we see it's in the Tao. Olga followed up with this comment: Wu Wei is the main principle of Tao philosophy, which speaks of the importance of achieving the Tao, or the natural way, in all actions and development of things, without forcing or rushing against the natural of order things, to avoid false development.
Wow, beautiful.
And mistakes. And Stocks Are Us followed up with this comment: I wonder if that has ever been in play in any civilization ever.
Well, we don't have to go backwards, we'll go forward.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks to all of our audience. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for you, but Bruce, your information was just so awesome and so compelling. And
Thank you.
be back here a month from now, everyone in the audience, and we'll continue this discussion. In fact, be back next week as well. I don't want to in any way encourage you not to show up every week for the show.
Yeah.
So thank you. Click, subscribe, share. We do have a growing audience, and it's very exciting to be a part of this. And thank you to everyone who's making it happen.